Is Europe doomed? Many far-right groups and figures have been saying that the death of Europe and the West in general is inevitable, whether it be economic, cultural, or political. It's headed the way of Rome. How much merit is there to this claim, though? Well, the facts show that it is not that crazy of an idea. So here are the top reasons why Europe is screwed. Starting with hate speech laws. Unlike America, European countries do not have a First Amendment. They don't have free speech. The hate speech laws are so excessive that even one of the most listened to talk show hosts in America, Michael Savage, is currently banned from the UK. And every day, more news comes out about people being punished and arrested in Europe for speaking their minds. From police raiding the homes of Germans that make right-wing social media posts, to men being arrested in the UK for making anti-Muslim tweets after the Brussels attacks. It never ends. It's not just the police in Europe either. The European Union has been happy to join in. In July, the European Union's executive branch launched plans to combat illegal online hate speech. Their goal? To work with companies like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to ensure that anything that they deem to be hate speech does not spread virally. The sites they're working with are given a 24-hour time limit to remove posts. Your nation cannot progress or address problems if it does not have the means to do so. Those means are free speech and open discourse. Our political system, economic systems, philosophies, all of them sprung from the ability to freely compete in the battle of ideas. It's the foundation of our political process, and yet that discourse has been utterly silenced in Europe. Unsurprisingly, all the things that people are being censored from talking about happen to be some of Europe's greatest issues. Voltaire wasn't kidding when he said, "It's dangerous to be right in the matters on which the established authorities are wrong," because they sure as hell messed up on the issue of immigration and Islam. Around 1 million migrants arrived in Europe in 2015, and currently Europe is on track to accept another 3 million according to the EU. This is despite the fact that the situation is admittedly a disaster. Even the biggest advocate of open borders, Chancellor Angela Merkel, has admitted they did not handle the crisis properly or protect the borders in the Schengen zone, and that they have ignored the problems coming along with this migration for far too long. If even Merkel is saying this is a problem, imagine the reaction from people without rose-colored glasses or 24-hour security. The migrant crisis has been a disaster. It has led to a massive influx in crimes, welfare abuse, and terrorism. And speaking of terrorism, let's talk about Islam. Yes, not every Islamist is running around blowing people up, and there are some very decent Muslims out there. But that does not change the fact that Islam, in the way that it is most commonly practiced, is a fascist religion that cannot coexist with the West. Islamic values like Sharia are counter to Western laws and culture. And that has become quite apparent in Europe as you see Islamists segregating themselves into their own enclaves all over the continent. They don't want to be a part of European culture. And these enclaves are not tolerant of non-Muslims or those who do not subscribe to the expectations of Islam. Hence why many of them have been dubbed no-go zones by the police. Islam is about submission, and the European populace will either submit to it or fight it, because it is a growing force across the continent. The most popular name in London for young boys right now is Mohammed. Things are going to look very different 20 years from now. From 1990 to 2010, the Muslim population in the Netherlands nearly tripled. In France, it went up by over 6-fold, and in the UK and Germany, it doubled. And that's just in 2010. Imagine what it'll look like in 2030. That brings me to another reason Europe is screwed, and that would be birth rates. In 2005 to 2010, the birth rates for Muslims and non-Muslims in Europe had a 0.7 difference, so Muslims had nearly double the birth rates of non-Muslims. In fact, there isn't a single country in all of Europe where non-Muslims have a higher birth rate than Muslims. With increased immigration of Muslims and the potential 3 million more migrants entering Europe, it's only a matter of time before Islam becomes the prominent religion in Europe. And Muslims know this. Whether it takes 50, 100, or 200 years, the trajectory is all headed in the same direction until something changes. What is happening right now has been described by French writer Renaud Camus as the Great Replacement. It's essentially the replacement of native populations with immigrants that have no connection to the history or culture of the country and have no intentions of assimilating to or preserving it, therefore shifting the entire identity of European nations, and as a result, killing them. Plenty of intellectuals agree with Camus, and some far-left Marxists even celebrate this death of the West. But what is evident to both sides is that this multicultural experiment has failed, especially when it comes to welcoming cultures that are incapable of coexistence. Is there any solution to this? Well, these countries could begin to put their people first. They could adopt civic nationalism with a strong sense of history, culture, and identity. Unfortunately, many of the people living in Western Europe hate themselves. They've been taught to hate themselves. The UK is constantly bashed for colonialism and are constantly trying to apologize and make up for it, despite the fact that no one alive today was colonizing countries with the British Empire. Then, of course, there's Germany and any other country that was allied with them in World War II that have deep-seated psychological issues linked to historical treatment of Jews and the Holocaust. People in America have been taught that slavery in their history was wrong and that they shouldn't repeat it, but they also understand that they aren't to be blamed for the acts of others. In Europe, especially Germany, I saw signs on every post calling for the death of the German people, the destruction of the German nation, and calls for the death of German identity. All of these things being posted by Germans themselves. They want their nation's culture and identity to die. And surprise, surprise, it's working. Western Europe has totally lost their sense of national purpose and identity, and it's killing them. It will end in disaster. Eastern European countries are trying to reassert their identity, and a lot of them are bringing back Christianity. Countries like Poland and Hungary are really swimming against the tide. They have a national purpose again. In a recent referendum in Hungary, nearly 100% of the country voted not to take in more migrants. In the long run, those will be the countries that have roots and a foundation to build upon. Other European countries are stating loud and clear that they don't believe in anything, that they have no identity. When you don't believe in yourself as a country or you don't have a future because of your low birth rates, what is there really? What's the point? Your borders are disappearing, your culture is disappearing, and your people are disappearing. Europe is on its deathbed. People living on the ground can see this a lot clearer than the intellectuals and media elites in their ivory towers. Whether you're a German in Marxloh who feels like his town has disappeared, a woman in Ukraine who can't pay her energy bills, or a man in Luton being stalked by police for dangerous speech. This is all happening right now. If Europe is not doomed financially, it surely is doomed culturally until people stand up in defense of their identities. Just because you went to Paris once and enjoyed a baguette while looking at the Eiffel Tower doesn't mean everything is fine and dandy in Europe. Rome in its final decades was a wonderful city, even as the city decayed. There's still wonderful things about Europe in the midst of its decay. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to subscribe to the Rebel Media for more and to hit that like button.